Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today, we are starting to refloat the ship, and I've been a little busy. So let's talk through some of the work we've done so far. While this project has literally been years in the making, it didn't really feel real until the first contractors came aboard for the first part of the project, removing the mast, the radar, and the radio antennas from the top of the ship's radar platform so that the ship could safely transit under the bridge. From that point on, the ship was ready to go, and whatever day the yard gave us availability on, we were able to go. The tow took place in two phases. First, we left our pier in Camden after over a week of work disconnecting electrical, internet, fire main, potable water, sanitary water, every sort of connection you can think of, what is commonly referred to as the hotel services. The gangways came off, and then the ship towed down the river, actually past the yard, to Paulsboro, New Jersey. Paulsboro is a deeper berth than the one we were in, and the ship has a trim of about 10 feet. She's 10 feet deeper at the stern than she is at the bow. We had to get that below 3.81 feet to be able to safely sit on the blocks. And really, we wanted some margin of error with that. So, the project started with ballasting operations at the deeper berth in Paulsboro. And that brought our bow down about 8 feet. Or realistically, about 7 feet, and I think it bumped our stern up a foot. So, we bought ourselves 8 feet. And then at the end of that week, we were able to tow the ship into dry dock. We didn't know the size of the cofferdams or blanks that the Navy put over the sea chests on the bottom of the ship. So, one of the early projects, once we got the ship into dry dock, before even draining the dry dock, was to send divers down. They had to inspect all 304 blocks, all four sides of those blocks, with 6 inches of visibility in the Delaware River. So this was a time-consuming project, and it ended up taking several days to completely dewater the dry dock. The dry dock was dewatered enough that on the morning of Easter Sunday, we were able to put on waders and walk under the ship for the first time. As we did an initial block inspection, workers already started moving through the dock with buckets to remove the fish that were trapped in there and repatriate them to the Delaware River. From there, 12 weeks of work started doing our main projects. These included repainting the bottom of the ship. That's a surface area of about 125,000 square feet. We were putting 3 coats of paint on there. First, we had to pressure wash that off with a low pressure wash that removed any growth. Then, an ultra high pressure wash, about 30,000 psi, removed all the paint and rust that was on there. Because the ship was so large, they couldn't blast the whole hull and then immediately start painting. So they were doing it in sections, which meant some parts of the hull went days between being blasted and painted. There was enough time for them to start rusting again. It's called flash rust. So the hull started to take on an orange shade in places. They came back and did another low pressure wash just to blast that off, along with any dirt and debris that had accumulated on there from the yard. At that point, the first of the system of coatings could go on. The hull was initially painted tan, followed by gray, followed by red. And then at the wind water line, there was also a coat of gold and then black over top of that. Seems like somebody at CCSI, our painting contracts, was a Steelers fan. In addition to paint, we replaced all the anodes on the ship. She originally had 1,204 1¼ inch zinc anodes. We replaced these with 600 2.5 inch thick aluminum anodes. These will provide our cathodic protection over the upcoming years. Because aluminum is lighter than zinc, we removed something like 6 tons of zinc anodes and replaced them with 3 tons of aluminum. We've already sold 2 tons of those anodes to guests like you who came out for the dry dock tours. We will have more anodes on hand in our store in Camden, but because of their weight, we haven't started shipping them to people who want to buy online yet. We haven't found a cost-effective way to do that. The third major project that we set out to do was inspecting all the through-hull openings. For these, we first had to drill a hole for an air fitting. Then we pumped them up to 1.5 pounds of pressure to see if they would retain that air. Many of them did not, and we had to do a soap test to see if the air was leaking on the outside of the cofferdam or inside through one of the valves. If it was on the outside, we made welded repairs. If it was on the inside, we noted it down but weren't worried about it. Finally, the air test fittings we drilled were plugged up, welded in place, and then vac boxed to see that they didn't have any holes. Throughout the project on weekends, we were able to do tours of the ship. These tours sold significantly better than we ever expected. We couldn't believe how many folks were interested in this project and came out to take a tour. It is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but we didn't realize that that meant that people were going to come from all over the world to do it. We were able to make enough money off of those tours to add additional projects onto the scope of work while we were in dry dock. The first one that we did was blanked over the propeller shafts, known as boxing the shafts. This is something that's been done on other museum ships, such as USS Slater. But we are by far the largest museum ship that's ever done this. This is going to help keep the shaft alleys watertight for a much longer period of time than the packing could. And it was completely funded by you guys' donations and ticket sales during this project. The next add-on that we were able to do was welding stiffener plates over the thin shell plating at the bow of the ship. The Navy had known about this issue and determined that it wasn't a big enough problem to be repaired, especially at the end of the ship's career. That absolved us from having to do any work, but one of the things that I'm thinking about through this project, and I know many of my coworkers are as well, is that our successor who have to do this in the future, we don't want them cursing our names for not doing everything we can as good as possible. So, through the money that you guys donated and through the ticket sale proceeds, we were able to add stiffener plates onto the bow of the ship to double the thickness in that area. That was the only part of the ship after the ultrasonic survey that was revealed to be any sort of critical condition. Another project that we found that we had to determine whether it was worth doing or not was recaulking all of the riveted seams on the ship. We have about 3 nautical miles of riveted seam below water, about 18,000 linear feet. So, finding that caulk on there was quite a surprise, and it took close to a month for us to find out why the Navy had done that, because it wasn't in any of the original documentation that we had consulted. Fortunately, we found a change order from 1990 showing why they did it and giving us enough of a lead that we were able to find out exactly what product they used. We were able to acquire that exact same product on very short notice in very large quantity, and were able to caulk all of the underwater seams. And if there was any issue with those leaking, it will not be an issue for another 30 years because the caulk that was on there originally, the same kind of caulk, has lasted for the last 34 years. About 2 weeks before the end of the project, we had to bump the ship or fleet her. This is how we paint the 10% of surface area that is below the keel blocks. So we had to float the ship up about 2 feet above the blocks, move her about 4 feet forward, and then set her back down again. This completely exposed all the areas that had not been painted yet. For the next 2 weeks, we basically redid everything we had done elsewhere in miniature. We blasted that paint off, we put new paint on, we put the caulk on, we welded the plates on in those areas. At the end of the day, we welded somewhere around 4 tons of stiffener plates on. And then the project was finished. While the yard period is over, the ship is not back home yet. So from here on out, we're going to refloat the ship, leave the dry dock and go to Paulsboro, deballast the ship, then go from Paulsboro to Camden. Depending on how the timeline works out for dredging our berth, we may paint the freeboard, put the mast back on, get all that out of the way over the next couple of months, or it may end up getting deferred until after we've dredged later this year. Stay tuned for future videos where we talk about the ongoing restoration work of the Battleship. We still have tickets available to ride the ship back to Camden on June 20th. If you're interested in participating, there's a link in the description below. Remember, we only have 15 slots. That's all the Coast Guard and our insurance company would allow. All the proceeds go to support the ongoing restoration efforts on board the ship once we arrive back home, including redecking the ship and painting the freeboard. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of their businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to support the ongoing restoration efforts. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about us and the channel. Thanks for watching.